Hi there. It's July the 17th and we're continuing our progress through Paul's letter to the Romans, and we're in chapter 4 and we're reading from verses 1 to 12. Paul has been saying that you can't be right with God just by keeping Torah. Although Torah is good, there has to be God's grace involved here, and he homes in now in chapter 4 on the character of Abraham. And Abraham is a key figure. He's key, obviously, for the Jews because they consider themselves as descended from Abraham physically. But Paul says it's not just about being descended from Abraham physically, it's actually about participating in the faith that he had when he trusted God. He points out the fact that Abraham didn't earn favour with God by doing something. It wasn't given to him as the wages, as payment for his reward for his doing something. It was actually God's free gift to him. It was God's action. It was credited to him as being right with God because he believed. Now, Paul makes the point that this is not something that he earned, but something that was a gift, as David speaks about in Psalm 32, when he says the man who has his sins forgiven is blessed, is in a state of grace before God. And Paul also makes the point that this blessing that Abraham received is not just for the circumcised, but also for those who are uncircumcised, because the promise of God that Abraham received, this blessing of God he received before he was even circumcised. Now I know that the language here is a little sensitive for us maybe, but the Greek here is very, very interesting because Paul uses the term, he doesn't use the term uncircumcised in Greek, he uses the term having a foreskin. And that would have been quite hard on the ears perhaps of his Jewish hearers, because for them having a foreskin was something not very nice, not something they would want to connect with godliness. But Paul here is very explicit in that sense, and he says that God blessed Abraham, that God credited this to him when he still had a foreskin, before he was circumcised, and therefore it wasn't dependent on his obedience to the law, but it was actually because the law wasn't even enacted then, and this was before the seal of circumcision, which comes in Genesis 17. His believing God was back in the earlier part of Genesis 12 to 15, where he trusts God and makes covenant with him. So Paul is making the point here that it is not necessary to have been circumcised in order to experience the revelation of God through faith. If faith is the key thing, it's because Abraham trusted God, and therefore Abraham is the ancestor in faith, if you like. He's the father of those who believe and still, like Abraham, have their foreskins, but he's also the father of the circumcised, who live now not dependent on the law to keep them right with God, but they live as those trusting in God through Messiah. It's very close arguing that Paul does here, but really what he's trying to point out is the fact that we're invited to trust God. It's not about doing stuff to please him. It's not about doing stuff to earn his forgiveness or to earn his favour, but actually God freely gives us to it, as he gave it to Abraham before he was even circumcised. Have a very good July the 17th.